And so my mission is just to kick this off and invite Dr. Kelsey Leonard up to the forum for her keynote presentation. She really has been an extraordinary partner who's been at the table with us. She, as I said, she's the co-chair of the OPC, but she's also a leader within her community, a representative of the Shinnecock Nation to the Mid-Atlantic Region Ocean Planning Body. So she works both directly with Marco as well as being a co-lead of the work that we're doing here. So I think is Kelsey just about ready? She's good. Oh no, she's thinking a little bit. So that's good. All right, other things to say. Let's kind of recap yesterday a little bit. Again, I do think really we had selected the topics yesterday, and some of you have heard a version of this, but I do think we really recognize the fundamental role that maritime commerce and safety plays in our region. The Mid-Atlantic is a specifically dynamic place for port and navigation activity. And the fundamental mission of the portal, and also Marco, has been to make sure that we can facilitate safe and what was it? Safe, sustainable marine navigation, really thinking about how we deconflict that with other users. So for those who don't follow the portal, and everybody should have a portal, I want to put a shout out actually for Carl Villacoba, who is our portal project manager. But he also, we're really excited right now that we've released a app for your phone that students at Monmouth University, shout out for the home university, have supported the development of this app. That we now have the ocean data portal. All the ocean data that we have is now accessible to everybody. So we do really encourage you to to download that app if you haven't already. We're continuing to improve that app. We're having discussions about enhancements to that and continuing that work so it really can be an asset. But really think about the potential of something like that, which is used by scientists. We heard yesterday that the maritime commerce community is using that every day. So we're thinking about how we use that to do complicated things that nobody really wants to understand, like AIS data. We need to know that, but actually nobody else knows to know that, but they really do need to know what is going on in the ocean and see what that framework is. So thinking about the portal, thinking about data, thinking about maritime commerce, and really the trends in that industry, that was something that we talked about yesterday. We not only need to know what we need to do in sort of the planning and policy world, but we also need to know what the industry and what their incentives are. So we heard a lot about that yesterday. So with that, I think I'm going to ask Kelsey to come up and get today's session going. So again, as I said, it's been a great pleasure personally, professionally, to work with Kelsey and continue to see the amazing work that she continues to do, both as a representative of the Shinnecock Nation and a leading kind of thought leader about the rights of nature and oceans. So with that, Kelsey, please come up.
All right. Good morning, everyone. How are we? Good. Exciting. Well, I am very happy to be with you all today. Yeah, I think, how are we doing on audio? I feel like it now just kicked in. Okay, good. All righty, so we will get going. So, Akwe Wanikasak, hello, good day everyone. As was mentioned by my esteemed colleagues, it's really great to be here with you all. I'm from the Shinnecock Nation, but I have a lot of hats that I wear, and so today I'm going to be more in my scientist hat for you all, but it all is connected, and in a lot of the ways that I've been engaged with the Mid-Atlantic regional planning processes for ocean protection in the past 15 years, I see my scientific practice as an evolution of that policy work as well. So today I want to talk to you a bit about ocean rights. So we still have a bit of a challenge in geography. It's something I don't understand with humans. We really have difficulty understanding location and where folks are from and situated, despite having this amazing data portal out there in the world. But if you haven't lately, all of the tribal nations for the Mid-Atlantic region are listed on the Marco data portal. You also can find an interface with Native Land Digital that allows you to see historic treaty lands, language, families, lots of really great information about tribes from the region, as well as our own tribe, the Shinnecock Nation. But again, I share this with folks who may be geography challenged. We're on the east end of Long Island in what's currently known as New York. Traditionally, our ancestral territory is all of what you see on the eastern portion of the island, but we now are, due to colonialism and genocide and illegal land takings, we have a territory that has been diminished to about 1,000 square acres that you can see on the eastern southern shores of Long Island. We are traditionally known for being Bay people, for being whalers, and those are still practices that we carry on today with a lot of traditional ecological knowledge around the ocean and the coastal systems of the Atlantic. So I also wanted to say tabutni, thank you, a bit of an acknowledgement to the indigenous nations whose territories we gather on today. So for the Baltimore region, you have the Piscataway and the Susquehanna folks, nations who are from this part of the world and who allow for us to gather here. I really love again, it's maybe the data map geek in me, but the Maryland, I believe it's the Maryland Native American office, as well as the Maryland Arts Council, put forward these images, which I believe are an interactive story map. These are just stills for the two nations of the Baltimore region. So if you haven't had a chance to check that out, definitely do that, because I thought it was a really nice mapping interface that shows both the current tribal nations across Maryland, but also historic tribes, which is very good to know in terms of the history of the region. So in what I want to share with you today, I like to start with a quote from Dr. Robin Wall Kimmerer. This is a quote from her book, Braiding Sweetgrass, and in it she says, "Knowing that you love the earth changes you. It activates you to defend and protect and celebrate, but when you feel that the earth loves you in return, that feeling transforms the relationship from a one-way street into a sacred bond." And I think in our current climate of our world today, we all are searching for ways to embody change, to embody transformation, to find hope. And I think that what Dr. Kimmerer does in her book and in her writings and science is perhaps provide one pathway or roadmap as to how to embody that transformation in our everyday lives. And I hope that after today's conversation, you may find a bit of that hope in some of the policy initiatives and legal initiatives that I'll be sharing with you. So this work that I'm sharing with you today is also informed by a wonderful Indigenous grandmother who I had the opportunity of knowing, learning from, and being mentored by. Her name was Josephine Mandamin. She's known as the original water walker, although she didn't really like that term. But she's known because she walked all of the Great Lakes multiple times and from each coast of Turtle Island in prayer and ceremony for water protection. And she said that we're all born of water, we're all connected with the water, we're all related in that way. Even though we're not related by blood, we're related by water. So water is very precious for us. And I think over the past 15 years to 2 decades of doing this work with many of you in this room, it's kind of how I feel. We are all related and connected because of this ocean, because of these waterways that bring us into this space. There's something about the places that we're connected to, the water that we're connected to, that makes us want to fight for it, that makes us want to keep showing up every day despite everything that's happening in our planet and in our world. So for us as Native people and as Indigenous nations, this is tied to our cosmology, to the inherency of our sovereignty and our governance, a teaching that we call often that water is our first medicine. It understands our roles that we have as women. It also understands in that way our role as women, that we are carriers of water, that we birth life onto this planet, and that within that nurturing environment of 9 months, with the first medicine that we as human beings hold and have is water. And so that is where our responsibility and duty forms out of. Our responsibility to protect water forms out of that desire to protect life, to protect the ability for future generations to generate and be regenerative. So it brings us to a question of, well, then what's wrong with our status quo? We're still birthing babies, which is great, so why is our water not protected? Well, in large part, it has to do, what I argue and others, it has to do with our legal system, the way in which many of us have to operate within regulatory frameworks, administrative frameworks, changing legal systems on a daily basis as of today, that really reshape and perhaps transform negatively our connections and relationships to water. So what we've seen in the past 5 decades or so, since the advent of the boom of the environmental movement in the 1960s and 70s, is the legalized destruction of nature. We have legalized the destruction of nature up to a certain threshold, a threshold that we deem still allows for some utilitarian benefit to humans. But unfortunately, in doing that, we have seen about 60% of our animal populations lost in the last 50 years. We know that 2/3 of the longest rivers no longer flow freely due to immense amounts of hydro manipulation and damming and hard engineering of these water ecosystems. We also know that about 50%, about half of coral reefs have been lost in the past 30 years. And although we've seen some restoration and regeneration, these trends and patterns, unfortunately, are still persisting towards decline. So that's where a new movement comes in, a movement that is an evolution and an extension of our environmental law called Earth Law, that recognizes the inherent rights of nature, of our planet, of Earth, to be able to thrive and flourish and naturally evolve. It's not too revolutionary. It hopes for and allows for a legal framework that provides a future in which humans and nature flourish together. So what are the origins of Earth Law? We often like to somewhat date it to 1972 with Christopher Stone's preeminent article, Why Trees Should Have Standing, which was a reflection on the Sierra Club lawsuit going through the highest courts of the United States at the time. What would it look like for trees to have inherent rights? Now, at the time, Stone was laughed off and sort of shrugged at being sort of a fanatic and having a fantastical idea. But today, we see these types of initiatives adopted in hundreds of countries around the world and in thousands of localities. So we know that the origins of Earth Law is an evolution. It's both a departure from environmental law as well as a new area for its extension. We understand that our current environmental laws, in some instances, are failing us. Perhaps in many ways it was due to our climate crisis, is due to our climate crisis. The way in which these frequency of events, the rapidity of them, how they're happening and how often they're happening, makes it so that the laws don't respond fast enough. So what would new laws look like that could be more responsive, that could be more adaptive to the extremes of our climate that we're seeing today? Earth Law is the proposed response to that. There's also a way in which Earth Law addresses the ontology of separation. So the legal system evolved from localized customary laws to the modern Western legal system based on separating humans from the rest of nature. We sort of think of the Enlightenment period, this idea that humans should be able to and can dominate nature. Well, Earth Law is a recognition that we should not be dominating nature, but that we are part of nature. So this movement, again, is sort of dated to 1972, but in many legal systems around the world predates that, goes back thousands of years. If you think about Islamic law, Judaic law, some of indigenous legal systems, these rights and protections for nature like water and trees and mountains go back thousands of years. But in this more contemporary movement, we date it to about 1972. And more recently, we had the first law textbook. So we actually see Earth Law being a part of the legal curriculum for law schools throughout the United States, but also around the world. And within this textbook that was published in 2020, that will be re-released in a second edition in 2026, I believe, Earth Law, sometimes called ecocentric law or ecological jurisprudence. It's an emerging body of law for protecting, restoring, and stabilizing the functional interdependency of Earth's life and life support systems. So you may be asking yourself, well, what is that? I often like to tell folks to think about Earth law as a tree. There are current branches that are on the tree, and then there are branches that will fall off, things that will maybe not be of legal value, moral value in 10, 15, 20 years. And there will be new branches that some of you, even in this room, might conceive of and be able to have brought out on the tree. But some of the branches that are in existence that you may be familiar with are the crime of ecocide, animal rights, broadly construed, guardianship for nature, rights of nature initiatives, rights for future generations, like the Juliana case, among many others that are working their way through our court systems successfully and unsuccessfully in some ways. It also includes human environmental rights. I won't go too much into that today, but I do think it's of great applicability in the context of the Mid-Atlantic region, because we do have 2 states that have a green amendment or a right to a healthy environment enshrined in the Constitution. That is New York and Pennsylvania. So if you're like, oh, we don't do Earth law in the Mid-Atlantic, well, we have 2 states that have it constitutionally enshrined already. We also have things like atmospheric trust litigation, and then some of the things I want to focus in on today are rights of nature, specifically ocean rights, and a bit about indigenous law so that you all can be more familiar with that. So this isn't just, Kelsey Leonard standing up here saying, yeah, think about, I'm not Christopher Stone 2.0 imagining some fanatical idea. It is a global movement, so I'm sharing with you some of our research and science of the policy and practice and law existing around the world. So we've seen constitutional amendments, there have been court decisions, local ordinances, indigenous law. How many folks are familiar with the Goldman Prize? Okay, a few folks. So the Goldman Prize, it's kind of like the Nobel for environmental conservation. It was just awarded to women water protectors of the Amazon for their fight to protect and have the Maritime River receive legal recognition under their law. And so we, again, just to re-emphasize that this is a global movement that has extreme merit in many of the highest courts around the world. So within this, there are other organizations that have been working to advance these rights. You have the Global Alliance for the Rights of Nature. You have the United Nations with the UN Harmony with Nature Initiative. You also have IUCN, who has a Rights of Nature task force. And I believe they also now have an either emerging or maybe already constituted ocean rights task force for those that are interested. Again, I won't have the opportunity to share all of these different types of initiatives that are happening around the world with you, but my colleagues and I in 2022 published this data portal that is consistently updated with current information related to environmental and earth law, eco-jurisprudential legal initiatives. It's called the Eco-Jurisprudence Monitor. So you can scan that QR code and it will take you to the monitor. You can examine it based on physical maps, which is largely connected to ecological actors and biomes. So if you want to know what are all the rivers that have rights on the planet, you can search through that. And in the political map, you can look through jurisdictions. So Ecuador, United States, New York State, Pennsylvania, things like that. I also should say that in the United States, kind of bringing it back to the Mid-Atlantic, Pennsylvania was one of the first states, particularly though a township, so home rule county municipality within Pennsylvania was the first to initiate a rights of nature law for the protection of a water course in Pennsylvania in 2007. So a bit of the history of the global movement is directly connected to the region, which I think is really important to know. So this is what the monitor looks like if you have an opportunity to go and take a look. There are thousands of initiatives. We were having a conversation about this the other day. So like, how many folks have done this in the world? There are thousands of earth law and ecological jurisprudence initiatives currently existing in our planet. So again, this is about challenging some of the threshold challenges for the development of Earth law. We do have instances of property law conflicting. Property law often states that nature belongs to the owner of the property. Standing is the other threshold that Earth law attempts to address. Really, the interest of nature as being seen as property doesn't make it considered a legal person to be able to bring a claim before a court for violation of and for harm. And so these initiatives are often trying to address that barrier. And then also guardianship, who gets to speak for nature. And there are instances in which the enforcement laws related to an Earth Law initiative or a Rights of Nature initiative speak to who gets to be the voice for that natural entity. So the status quo, we're really trying to, again, how do we embody transformation? We want to get to a point where we are seeing nature and future generations have rights and standing. We want to hopefully get to a place where humans and nature are part of an interconnected web of life, where they're not seen as separate, that sort of separation ontology, where nature is not seen as a resource for consumption and exploitation. So that's where you have this one component of the tree, the one branch, rights of nature. It says that nature has rights. It's changing the paradigm or the philosophy of property or nature being property, and addresses the root cause of environmental destruction, right? That we are legalizing the destruction of nature up to a certain threshold that still allows for utilitarian benefit to humans. We're trying to flip that and say, what does nature need, not what do we need? And so we already see this being adopted. So rights of Mother Earth, rights of nature is embedded within the Kunming Montreal Biodiversity Framework. If you haven't had a chance to read it, I encourage you to go back and look at the text. It's already embedded there. IUCN, again, has their task force, and then the United Nations has been very active in promoting these different types of initiatives. Earth law is also connected to commitments to advancing Indigenous rights. And I think as we face difficult and different political times right now, it's important to ask yourselves in your various roles, whether they be connected to government or otherwise, how are you protecting and working to advance Indigenous rights? And so we have many of these Earth Law initiatives protected as well under international law in the context of Indigenous peoples having the sovereign inherent rights to put forward a law that protects a natural being, a natural kin, and that's protected under the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. So we also, shifting in the last few minutes that we have together, we know that this conversation is also a part of the ocean, and what we're seeing is these Earth Law conversations move to what does Earth Law look like in the context of ocean health and ocean conservation. So about 50 to 80% of all life on Earth is found in the ocean. It produces half of the world's oxygen, absorbs and sequesters 1/3 of the carbon dioxide. We all know this. You all in this room are very much ocean advocates. So what are we doing to help? Especially when our current laws and regulatory system we feel may be failing us. So we know that the ocean health, similar to what I shared earlier, is in decline. And we know that there are folks working to accelerate a transition towards ocean health conservation. So we have the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea. We have the negotiations happening for the BBNJ. So these are things happening in our high seas, maybe a little bit situated outside of the work we do within regional ocean partnerships. But that is exactly why I want us to have this conversation today. We have folks who are working in the high seas. We have folks who are working in the intertidal and the interior riverine systems on Earth Law. Where is that offshore, nearshore context of protection? Perhaps it's the folks in this room who need to be advocating for that. And so A lot of this conversation links to the Sustainable Development Goals. There are many Sustainable Development Goals that are failing in performance, but let's just focus on SDG 14, which is life below water. Some believe that advocacy in the space of ocean rights would help us to meet some of those requirements put forward in those Sustainable Development Goals. And then there are, again, advocacy at the different climate conferences, and I will talk about more about the upcoming UN Ocean Conference in Nice. So ultimately, in the context of the ocean, our current worldview, the dominant worldview, I would say, is that the ocean is an open access resource. And what we're trying to do is shift that. The laws that we currently have for the ocean, as many of you are familiar, do not prevent harm. You all are here talking about immense amounts of harm and threats to ocean and ocean life that you're concerned about. So what does good governance look like? What does a healthy ocean look like? It means that our values should be reflected in our laws and policies that ultimately should allow for protection and restoration. Otherwise, we're just creating a system in which we promote decline. And so that shift in paradigm is we need to think of, removing this idea from property to equal member, from human-centric to nature-centric. We can start to think about how we balance human and environmental needs, how we think about protecting the environment as a legally defensible priority, because the other aspect of this work is it's not just perhaps creating a law that recognizes the rights of the ocean, but then it's about enforceability. And many of us in this room, after making many different policy documents and advocating for different legislative initiatives over the years, know that just because you make a law doesn't make it enforceable, perhaps. Should. But we do need to think about enforceability. And so ultimately, when we say the ocean has rights, it's that the ocean has a right to exist, thrive, and evolve because it exists as a matter of recognizing and upholding these rights. And so, where is this happening? Last few minutes that we have together, this isn't theory, this isn't, Christopher Stone in 1972 throwing out a fantastical idea. We already see in Europe, in Spain, we have the rights of Mar Menor, an interior Mediterranean Sea lagoon that was recognized by the Spanish Congress, went through, again, a court decision affirming the protection and its inherent rights. And so that is solid law that is now going through implementation and enforcement. In the United Kingdom, we are seeing advocacy for rivers at this time in both Scotland and Ireland, as well as in England proper. We have seen conversations around coastal and ocean rights as well happening. And then the Embassy of the North Sea, as well as the Wadden Sea, have gone through different initiatives for recognition of inherent rights. We also see an indigenous law. So here within the Mid-Atlantic region, we had the Rappahannock tribe who recently enshrined the rights of the Rappahannock River in their constitution. So we see that inherently being embedded into indigenous legal systems. We also have seen on the West Coast the first indigenous marine protected area in the United States. It's an indigenous marine stewardship area led by 4 federally recognized tribes off of the coast of North Carolina, protecting about 10% of the what might be of their coastline, also equitable to about 10% of the California coastline. So when we think about 30 by 30, tribes are actively leading in this space to protect ocean and marine conservation. Also here in the Mid-Atlantic, we have the state of New York. I have to do a bit more reflection on the bill because there are recent changes that have been put forward. But in 2019, we had the Lake Erie Bill of Rights. That was struck down in the court system. Ohio, conservative, very hostile. It wasn't likely that, which was a city-led initiative, was going to live at the state level. But we also had a bill for recognizing the Great Lakes in Parliament in Canada. And then most recently, we have an active bill that's been proposed in the New York State Legislature. Originally, it was just for the inherent rights of the Great Lakes. It's now been updated to be the Great Lakes and all waters of the state of New York. So this is pretty massive. It also trends with what's happening in Minnesota. They're doing a Rights of Monoman, a Rights of Wild Rice state bill, legislative bill, that would protect all wild rice in the state of Minnesota. So I do have a very educated guess and prediction and probability that we will see more state legislation moving forward and being adopted. And particularly for the New York case, I wonder, I have to go back to the legislator to find out if all waters of New York includes those 3 miles of state waters of ocean environment. So when we think about ocean rights, we're really, we're seeing this happen. Rhode Island passed a state resolution in support of ocean rights. Aruba has proposed constitutional amendments on the rights of nature, including ocean rights. We also see that in Bermuda, embedding it into their corporate tax law, that there have to be protections for the Atlantic Ocean if you are wanting to sort of have a offshore locality in Bermuda. We also have seen 7 governments in Washington state pass resolutions for the recognition of orca rights. There was an indigenous treaty for right whales led out of the Pacific in the past year. I believe it was right whales. I have to go back and look at that. But that treaty is very interesting for the Oceania community. We also have seen this petition for a Universal Declaration of Ocean Rights that was moved forward and advanced by Ocean Race, Ocean Legal Vision, Earth Law Center, and many others in recent years, and is being advocated for at Nice in 2025. That's the UN Ocean Conference will be hosted in Nice, France. We also saw Panama in March of 2023 passed a nationwide law recognizing the inherent rights of sea turtles. So they are protected rights of nature-based species in Panama. So all of this, again, coming to a conclusion, I can't share all of the amazing ways in which ocean rights and ocean law is already active in our community and on our planet, but there was a wonderful special issue done by PLOS Biology a few years ago called Ocean Solutions for a Sustainable, Healthy, and Inclusive Future. And within that, we have an article you can scan here called Living in Relationship with the Ocean to Transform Governance in relation to the UN Ocean Decade. Give folks a minute to scan that. Not because you have to, just because I saw. I think we'll make the slides available too for folks if they would like them. So within this, we position within the UN Ocean Decade, the ocean is living, right? Rather than the ocean as resource. The ocean is living. So within that, what types of duties or responsibilities does that imbue for us as the ocean scientific community? Well, it means that we have to understand ocean rights, that we have to think about ocean protection, we have to think about how we relate to the ocean, how do we build that sacred bond versus a transactional one-way street. We have to think about data sovereignty, which is something we do a lot here at the Mid-Atlantic and regional ocean partnerships, which is great. And then also concerns around ocean justice and how the ways in which we make decisions about the ocean impact people as well as the ocean itself. So I want to leave you with some hopeful things as we close out. This is what I note to, I think, be the first Earth law immigration law on the planet. Has anybody been to Palau before? Okay, one? Yeah, good. Did you go for an ocean conference? There you go. So this, I don't know if this was in your immigration process when you went, but it should be now. This is the country of Palau. They put an immigration pledge for anyone that comes to Palau to say that you will not impact their island for future generations. So it's a Rights of Future Generations immigration pledge. And it's really, really interesting in the way in which we see that being an embodiment of Earth law. We also have current advocacy for the rights of Antarctica, both the territory as well as the extended ocean environment. So you can scan that to learn more about the organizations that are working for the rights of the Antarctica. And then, as I mentioned, there's this potential to contribute to a universal declaration for ocean rights. And I hope that that will be something of a seed planted with you all today to think about, well, what does it look like to advocate for ocean rights, to think about ocean rights in the context of the work we do in the Mid-Atlantic? And hopefully, we all can leave this week asking ourselves, not what science do we need from the ocean, but what science does the ocean need and want? So There are some additional resources here at Earth Law Portal if you're looking to do a local initiative with your organization, maybe through your state. Some of you may be state reps, so you might not be able to do that, but you can pass the links on to the right people. And with that, again, remember knowing that you love the earth changes you, and I hope today we'll lead with love and be able to leave inspired with ideas to come to protect the ocean. So, Miigwech Tabutni, thank you, and great to be with you.
So you can see why she's inspired us over these years to continue to work. Again, we are a microcosm of these bigger ideas, and how we incorporate them into the work we do, I think, is something that really is something we constantly need to remind ourselves. So we are going to move on to the next panel. So ask Kristi and the panelists to come up and get going here. We'll get those.
Hello. Welcome to all of you. Good morning. Thank you for joining us for the Mid-Atlantic Ocean Economy session. As Tony and Avalon mentioned, I am Kristi Lieske. I work for Delaware's Department of Natural Resources and Environmental Control, and I'm also currently honored to serve as the state co-chair for the Mid-Atlantic Ocean Planning Committee. It's an honor to join you here together as we explore one of the most dynamic and essential engines of our region, which is the marine economy. From the busy ports of Virginia to the fishing docks of Maryland and the beaches providing tourism opportunities and recreation opportunities in Delaware and New Jersey, and the marine jobs that are part of the New York coastline. The ocean is not just our backdrop, it's our livelihood here in the Mid-Atlantic. And each of our states are unique in the top drivers of that Mid-Atlantic ocean economy. But overall, we see there's three really big drivers of the ocean economy here in the Mid-Atlantic, and that's tourism, being that really, really big one. Tourism's huge here, and maritime commerce, and what NOAA now calls living resources, which now I feel like kind of weird about saying after Kelsey's presentation there and her talk, but we'll call them like natural or living beings, and it's sort of like everything related to seafood. And so these sectors support thousands of jobs and billions of dollars in the regional GDP. Our coastal communities rely on healthy beaches, navigable waterways, and productive fisheries to thrive. But this engine doesn't run in a vacuum. It's intricately linked to the health of our ecosystem, and which is under increasing pressure. Changing ocean conditions, including warming waters, rising sea levels, and declining water quality, pose real and immediate challenges. In short, the resilience of our blue economy depends on how we respond to these environmental changes through innovation, collaboration, and sound policies. Sustainable management, science-based decision-making, and investment in climate resilience infrastructure will all be crucial as we move forward. So this session is not just about recognizing the economic value of our coastal and marine resources, it's about securing the value for future generations. We've brought together a fantastic panel of experts representing the industries of those three major drivers of the marine economy. So let's use this time to learn from each other, share solutions, deepen our commitment to protecting and sustaining the Mid-Atlantic region. Will, Mark, Adam, and Janet will each present their perspectives on the ocean economy, and then we'll have time for audience questions at the end, so please feel free to jot down anything and save it for the last 15 minutes or so. Thank you for being here, and let's get started. We'll first have Will Fediw, Senior Vice President of the Virginia Maritime Association. He will touch on the maritime commerce sector of the ocean economy. Will is a Senior Vice President of the Virginia Maritime Association, the Commonwealth's 5-year-old trade association representing over 460 maritime transportation and supply chain companies. In this capacity, WIL plays a leading role in creating and implementing business development and legislative strategies to improve Virginia's economic and political climate for those sectors. Furthermore, he regularly collaborates with state, federal government, and business leadership on win-win solutions that advance the Commonwealth and increase overall competitiveness. WIL is also does a lot of other things, and I'm sure he can speak to that, but in the interest of time, I will invite him to come up here. Thanks, Will.
Good morning, everyone. Yes, I hit a, oh, here we go. Well, it's a pleasure to be with you again. I personally do really enjoy coming to the Marco events and kind of engaging with you, because it is the collaboration where we all really need to get together with our different perspectives on shared ocean utilization and figure out how we can do this in a win-win way. So I'm really here to touch on a snapshot of what's going on in Virginia in the maritime commercial space, but this is really relevant to basically the Mid-Atlantic region as a whole. All right, so some quick facts about Virginia. Second largest port on the East Coast by tonnage, third in container volume, 55 different state-owned and operated terminals for moving commercial cargo and shipyards. We're the largest metallurgical coal exporter in the United States, so 40% of the nation's coal that is used for steel production is exported through Virginia. We have the largest shipbuilding ship repair complex in the United States, home to the world's largest Navy base, actively dredging to 55 feet. So you can kind of get from that snapshot, there's a whole lot going on in the commercial space in the Mid-Atlantic region. And this is what I really call my who cares document, because numbers really matter, especially when you're talking with legislators and officials. So for us in Virginia, and I would say this for the Mid-Atlantic, maritime is not something that we do in addition to a bunch of things. We like to say that Virginia means maritime as a primary driver of our economy. This was a recent study by William and Mary on FY22 data that showed that 1 in 5 jobs in Virginia were tied to the maritime economy, 14% of the state's GSP. And you see some of those large numbers there that really drive home that by taking advantage of our natural resources, natural deep water in Virginia, strategic location in the Central Atlantic, we've been able to really capitalize on the maritime economy. I hope you recognize and appreciate this slide. We are a very, very busy port, and that creates a lot of different opportunity. But all those things I mentioned, second largest port, largest shipbuilding, ship repair, offshore wind. We're also home to the largest offshore wind project in federal waters with Fediw that's under construction right now. You can imagine how much we then have to coordinate and collaborate to make sure that we're not cannibalizing any one industry in Virginia or in the Central Atlantic. So my favorite tool to tell the story, the Marco portal, this is a snapshot where I usually say, look at all the AIS tracks, look at the Fediw project, look at the different magenta areas that really highlight DoD training activity, and it's a very busy place. So collaboration becomes that much more important. But today I really want to focus on growth and really how the Mid-Atlantic region is growing in the commercial space. So like I said, largest shipbuilding, ship repair complex, so we build a lot of these. So Newport News is the only place in the United States that builds nuclear aircraft carriers, and it's one of 2 places that builds nuclear submarines. And so for us, especially with things like AUKUS, new EO from the administration really highlighting shipbuilding as a major driver now to push forward in the United States, we are seeing a very large growth in our shipbuilding and ship repair industry, and not just on the coast, but also inland in Virginia, because more and more the technology is allowing for construction of modules. So a lot of the components for shipyards and submarines, for example, are now being built 3 hours inland in Danville, Virginia, in modules, and then brought to the shipyard for final assembly, kind of like Lego blocks. So massive work going on in the DoD shipbuilding space. We're also currently building a lot of these. If some of you were at the International Partnership Forum in Virginia Beach, or the IPF conference, major offshore wind conference a few weeks ago in Virginia Beach, these are the 2 turbines from the CVAL project for Dominion Energy, and right now they're in the middle of constructing the commercial project with 176 turbines. And it kind of looks like this in our harbor right now. Beautiful shot that shows our Portsmouth Marine Terminal, which was converted for the transition of the construction pieces. So you see the monopiles there, which I love to call giant cigarettes. And once you see it, you'll never unsee it. And some of the offshore wind developers don't like when I say that, but it's the only thing that it looks like to me. So you see the giant cigarettes there, the monopiles that go in the ocean floor, the yellow transition pieces that go on top, which is then where the rest of the tower and the monopiles and the nacelles actually go. So you can imagine the amount of commercial activity that we have in our port right now around offshore wind. And the interesting thing is the data that I showed you for FY22, 1 in 5 jobs, 14% GSP, that was before offshore wind, so that has no offshore wind data in it. So those economics are even higher for us. And offshore wind is constructed by vessels like this. So this is the DEME offshore vessel Orion going in and out of our port. Massive vessel. And it's really neat to show when you look at the evolution and growth of now the clean energy sector, it's being done with work vessels like this. Recently, there was also the announcement of the LS Greenlink cable export facility. So what this is, this was a $680 million investment in Virginia. It's actually Virginia's largest federal international FID, you know what I mean, foreign direct investment, excuse me, in our state so far. And this company's from South Korea. It's building subsea export cables for offshore wind. And so what's really neat is they chose Virginia as a location independent of any offshore wind project. It's because they like Virginia. They like the central Atlantic. They like the location to both the global and national offshore wind market, job sector, et cetera. So this is a big area for growth for us for offshore wind manufacturing. This is an example of a different facility, Titan America. It's a $37 million expansion for the imports of cement. So if you've ever bought a bag of, ready mix concrete or anything like that, it's imported by companies like this. Also a $60 million expansion for exports. So this is Purdue Agribusiness Terminal in Chesapeake, Virginia, major ag exporter to the international market in soybeans, soy products like crushed soy meal, oils, et cetera. Our cruise ship sector. So we recently just announced weekly cruises out of Norfolk, Virginia, year-round. So if you're looking for an easy place to cruise out of, come down to Norfolk and do that. Significant growth over the last few years. That went from, for example, in 2023, 48 cruise ships to 76 expected for 2025, 320,000 passengers, 320,000 passengers for 2025, and 18.7 million in economic development through cruise ship spending in Norfolk for this year. So again, another one of my favorite shots, and really the point of all those slides I was showing you before is showing the economic growth in the Central Atlantic in the commercial sector, and this has to be protected. I like to use this slide to talk about the Coast Guard fairways, which you might have been following, how it interacts with both existing and proposed offshore wind lease areas, subsea cables, that's the 3 blue lines across the bottom for the transatlantic telecom industry, and it's a very busy place, which means we all have to be collaborating together on kind of what we do and what people perceive to be open ocean. So here's some of the challenges that I would say, from my opinion, we're seeing impacts to the landscape for coastal economies based on various factors. Big drivers of change like COVID, if you remember, lots of disruption in the supply chain. One, on the manufacturing side. So you think of China, who makes all the stuff we buy. Well, if their workers are sick, there's no products, stores become empty, right? This also created these whiplashes of surging demand, instead of like a nice smooth supply chain where we all got used to the term just-in-time inventory, where products, basically as soon as the shelf gets empty, something new is there and we keep it very lean. But it's kind of moved back to what we're calling a just-in-case strategy, where people are starting to stockpile goods again because they're just totally uncertain of what's going to happen today or tomorrow in the supply chain. Climate change impacts are part of that, and I'll touch on that a little bit. When you look at more severe storms, impacts to sea level rise, Norfolk and Virginia Beach is actually the second fastest sinking area in the country behind New Orleans. So we have to think of those factors in the supply chain. And droughts, when you think of things like the Panama Canal. If you had watched any of that last year, seen any of the headlines about what was going on in the Mississippi River, in the Panama Canal, where water levels was significantly impacting the ability for vessels to transit and move goods. It matters because, as we've kind of touched on, and you'll hear from this panel, lots of different industries rely on the coastal Virginia and kind of that ecosystem for livelihoods. Just a few things I kind of mentioned. You are seeing bigger hurricanes, bigger typhoons. Those can close ports. They can disrupt supply chains because things are used to moving fluidly. And then when a port can't operate for several days and ships start stacking out, those actually lead to weeks worth of disruptions, right? So a few days turns into a few weeks, if not more. Flooding damages, that's self-explanatory. We're seeing it more in roads. We're seeing it more in port terminals where that has to be factored. And drought, like I said, in the ability globally, impacting water levels, which again puts a crunch on that supply chain. We have seen, some of you are more familiar with changing migration patterns of like marine mammals and how that changes where marine mammals are now showing up in places that they typically were not. So now those commercial marine sectors have to now account for those things. And even heat waves, rising temperatures, and how that impacts personnel, equipment that's moving our goods back and forth. Some of the consequences for coastal regions, and I've touched on some of these already. Congestion. Whenever you have situations where there's a pause in the supply chain, that ripple effect goes well beyond what you can imagine. We're seeing higher insurance costs because of these things. Compliance costs are rising. We do see climate resilience strain on local budgets. When you think of investments take time, and that's actually a really good area for permitting reform across the board, where we can look to get resilience projects permitted faster so that they can actually be put in place sooner to protect our transportation infrastructure. So what about some adaptation strategies? One of my big focal points, and many of my Virginia partners hear this, is for us to be able to come together and really have those collaborative approaches. When you think of joint emergency planning, this is a time where when you think of like big hurricane exercises, making sure that all the right players are in the room so that we can thoroughly exercise what a major storm event would look like in our respective regions. You can Google green shipping corridors. There's some interesting efforts on how whole supply chains are working together, from importers and exporters to ports and ships, are all looking for ways to reduce the total carbon footprint overall of an entire transit and creating these green shipping corridors. And again, collaborating on infrastructure upgrades. I would say something that our region does well in Virginia with our congressional delegation is getting on the same page as far as asks. So instead of all our groups going to our congressional delegation and saying, well, this group wants this group wants this group wants this, and then your congressional delegation gets a little overwhelmed with like how to prioritize that. But if you can sync everybody up and get everybody on the same page that says, as a region, our synchronized number one ask is this, let's say it's an infrastructure project or it's a resilience protection project. It makes Congress's job so much easier when they know that everyone is aligned and they don't have to pick winners and losers. Some of the same, like I said, the storytelling piece, which I brought up last year, is crucial. Using tools like Markov to visualize and have that real-time data, making the right partnerships with people outside the industry of you. I always tease, I said, I'm probably the only non-scientist who comes to the Marco events, right? But I come here so that we can interact and engage, and you can hear what's important to the commercial marine sector. I can hear what's important to you. And then we work collaboratively for shared ocean utilization and how we can create these win-win efforts. Key takeaways, things you already know. Climate change is reshaping maritime commerce and coastal economies, but some of these things are predictable. We know how to model it, we know how to prepare for it, so we need to be preparing for it, right, collectively, and seeing where we can do that together. Again, just collaboration. I know that sounds silly to say it over and over again, but I can't think of a better word to really explain how important it is for all of us as ocean users, as caretakers, to work proactively together with open minds to kind of protect our coastal economies, look forward to the future, and make sure that, you know, we're protecting all the things we need to protect, including groceries on the shelves, jobs for our regions, et cetera. So thank you for the time. That is a brief overview of what's going on with us, and I look forward to your questions later.
Thanks, Will. Oh, good, this works. I don't have to get up again. That was wonderful. Our next presentation, given by owner of Delaware Cultured Seafood, Mark Casey, will provide the seafood and aquaculture perspective of the ocean economy. Mark Casey is a resident of Millsboro, Delaware, and he wears a lot of different hats, so get ready for it. He's a retired global engineer director of DuPont and Chemours, North America distributor of BST Cages, president of Delaware Aquaculture Association, Delaware director of East Coast Shellfish Growers Association, and like I said, owner and operator of Delaware's only private shellfish nursery, a volunteer for Delaware Center for the Inland Bays, a shellfish farmer, husband, father of 2, grandfather of 4.5. Did I get that right? Yeah, okay, 4.5. Guess one's still brewing. Got one wonderful. And he is going to go ahead and get started. I will give the mic to him. Thanks, Mark.
Slides? Hit the right arrow? Yep, got it. Right arrow. All right, so good morning, everybody. Thank you for letting me come. Thank you for loving the environment. So I'll try to do the history of the inland bays. I know this is an ocean forum, but really the inland bays are critical for the ocean to be healthy. So I try to work locally to impact globally. So Mid-Atlantic Ocean economy, this is what Kristi gave me for a, we're gonna go do this. And I said, holy cow, that's a big thing. Economy. Well, I understand that, right? I'm an aquaculture guy. Aquaculture's there to make money. I got that. Then I kept reading farther and said, long-term economy and environmental resilience. Rarely do we see those two things together. So I'm going to try to meet that goal, but I think that's a pretty big one. So our timing here in the inland bays, Delaware Inland Bays, right? So early 1990s. Can you hear me okay in the back? Yep, okay. EPA came in, did an evaluation of our inland bays, and the score was a D. Delaware legislation passed the Center for Inland Bays Act, CIB, largely funded from the EPA. We're very similar to the Chesapeake Bay Foundation, only a smaller bottle of water that you can't see from the moon as well. I think that's why they get a lot more money. One of the issues was excess nutrients in algae, right? So many of you know the story of algae coming in, blocking the sun, creating hypoxic zones, killing the inland bays. That's really what we were trying to do. Somewhere around 2000, Center for Inland Bays asked the question, how do we get the algae out, right? And getting the algae out was bivalves. Great solution. So we created the Center for Inland Bays Oyster Gardening Program, and it really had two goals. We wanted to demonstrate that we could grow oysters or bivalves in the inland bays to remove nutrients from the watershed. And it's really a community outreach and education. And I got a few more years on a lot of the folks in the room. We are moving the curve.
and I can see that the education that we do with young peoples and the books that are written really changes our value systems. And in the end, this is about value systems. So, you know, who am I? Why am I here? I'm first an environmental guy. I know you heard that I work for DuPont and I was a director of DuPont, but I am really an environmental concerned citizen. Spend lots of time enjoying the outdoors. I have years watching the habitat degrade. So I think that's the other value that the older folks bring, is that we remember when it was. And you look at a bad environment and you see nothing because that's all you've ever seen. I look at a bad environment and I see something that's radically different than it was when I was a kid. So there's this big thing of what did it used to be, and I don't really know how to go back there, but I hope you folks can help us figure that out. I have waterfront property, right? So, gee, I guess I'll join this oyster gardening program. I started setting spat on shell, moving oysters all over the place, growing them in our backyard, really trying to figure out if we could make this oyster thing work. Somewhere around 2013, so we've got a lot of years moving, not a lot of progress moving. Center for Inland Bays knows that we want to improve the wildlife habitat. And wildlife is a word that I don't see in many of the presentations, even the Earth Law thing, and I think it's an important one. At least it helps me visualize who the target audience is. Degrading wildlife habitat, I worked for DuPont, right? Usually makes money for one or more of the stakeholders. NIMBY, man, that's a tough word. We'll come back to that one. And primary beneficiary, wildlife, doesn't have any money. So how are we gonna help wildlife? I mean, it is really quite the challenge. And the previous presentation really showed that money is really important. How are we gonna pay for it? Who are the other stakeholders? Stakeholders is an interesting word for me. In DuPont, we had stakeholders, we used it all the time to make every evaluation. There were stockholders, and then there were stakeholders. And they didn't have the same vote. And as I've moved into aquaculture, trying to get laws changed, every stakeholder gets the same power of vote. And I think that's the bigger challenge for why progress is so slow. So one of the things we need to work on as we're all working on these issues is stakeholders, how we get votes, and how we meet common goals. You know, the values. What are the values of the stakeholders? I love the Earth Law presentation, and the values of those charts versus some of the other charts you see are very different. So getting our hands around values and how we meet common values, I think, is another large challenge. Center for Inland Bays went ahead and created this thing called the Tiger Report. The Tiger Report turned the environmental benefit of growing oysters into money. And in the end, we all know that money is what controls changing those legislators. So solution, self-funding industry that uses clams and oysters to clean the bay while making farmers rich. Anybody in the room doesn't think that's a fabulous idea? I mean, how can you beat that? That was like perfect. Does it work in other states? Shellfish aquaculture, United States, East Coast, $180 million. Man, you got the legislators' ideas there. Man, they're looking, they're saying there's money here, there's jobs here. I think always turning our environmental projects into there's jobs and there's money is an important part of it. And for those of you that write grants, you know how important that is. Delaware is actually on this chart, even though you can't see it, which is kind of the punchline of the story. So we'll go back in time again. 94, EPA says the bay's a D. 17 years later, we actually get a bill done and we're starting to make progress. 2018, we've got our first aquaculture lease. 2025, we're still hoping to change regulations to make it more business friendly. So aquaculture is a NIMBY of a type, right? They're trying to do something. We've had an awful lot of fighting about who wants to look at us, who doesn't want to look at us, whether we can be federally insured like farmers on land, lots and lots of issues. And how we get to greater benefit for society, I think, is another question that all of us need to understand in the balance of all this. So why? You know, stakeholders, I've said stakeholders and NIMBYs twice, right? Stakeholders has become something that I really have struggled with, right? We've got the regulators who can make a lot of rules. It is quite amazing how many rules Corp and EPA and Delaware State have made. We got legislators, okay, well, they make the laws and the regulators have to follow the laws, but we really got voters. And going out and convincing voters that your project is valuable is really, I think, the key. And that's why we were able actually to get aquaculture in Delaware. The landowners and the people that are there, the historical groups, indigenous folks, Nanticoke Indians, they weren't on that slide. And we have a couple in our group, so I'm a little sensitive to that one. Lots and lots of stakeholders there. NIMBYs, what drives their values? The stuff that we did in Delaware for breaking farms up into 1-acre plots with 20-foot navigation channels for kayakers that made the industry so difficult was quite amazing. I try to look at this NIMBY thing and understand where their values are coming from. I think it's property value. We now have this new word called viewscape. I don't know how many of you have been involved in the U.S. wind things where you're looking out in the ocean and there's a light out there at night and that light bothers you versus having green energy. Still can't figure that one out. Family health, I think family health is probably an important one. And then job duties, enforcement. So, gee, you're not going to do that because my job says you're not going to do that. So from an aquaculture industry perspective, current trends, back to the objective here, emerging issues, marine mammals, another NIMBY group, right? So oyster cages now in the inland bays that's 3 feet long that have a line on it to a float have permit requirements. Sometimes we get a little carried away. Bird health concerns, environmental swings. For those of you that are familiar with Hatteras area and Pamlico Sound, the guys that grow oysters down there 2 summers ago, the drought actually drove the salinity so high it killed their oysters. So drought affects in lots of different ways. Hurricanes seem to be well covered. For those of us that are up in the Northeast, the insurance programs, ELAP and others, don't cover Northeasterns. So if your farm gets torn up, gee, that's not a covered event. So one of the things we're working on trying to change. Waterway to highway access, one of our big issues, right? So all the waterfront property has been bought up by people that have multi-million-dollar homes. The recreational fishermen paid for the ramps. You can't get a private ramp. You can't get a boat ramp. How do you run aquaculture out in the bays? So it really is the biggest thing that we're working on in Delaware. Funding, all of you in the room are familiar with the funding challenges that are going on. We really need technical and scientific support. We've got several new emerging diseases probably coming from the weather swings. We've got illegal imports of oysters and clams that have been analyzed as being pretty hazardous, right? You get them out there and you scare everybody and nobody's buying oysters or clams anymore. It really is a problem. So getting us in part of the farm program, getting us part of ag versus the fisheries group has been another one of our big challenges that we're still working on. And then there's the other request, right? Environmental resilience. I think this environmental resilience is really what's at my heart. So we do a lot of training at our house. We try to do a lot of that education. We try to change the value system of people coming up. And we really start out with, this question: where do you really want to take your grandkids and your kids, right? You want to put them in that macroalgae marsh when you step in it, it turns black. You want to put them in that water you can't see 2 inches in, or do you want to put them in something like the bottom picture? For those of you that have been to any of the Delaware beaches or Ocean City, that's what our waterways used to look like. And when I tell you the history piece, that's what the waterway used to look like. We would stand in the water, chest deep, and we would see our toes. I've now convinced, because metrics is a big thing for folks in the room, I've convinced the Center for Inland Bays that the metric for the Center for Inland Bays is Mark can stand in the water and see his toes, because it's just so vivid when people see that. So turbidity, right? We all talk about turbidity. We've talked about turbidity a long time. I talked about, we've got this nutrients coming in. We've got algae blooming. We got to get the algae out. The grass has died over the years. As that grass died, the bottom got loosened. And I believe personally that suspended solids has become a bigger problem than nutrients. So how do we work on the suspended solids thing? How do we have seagrass areas? We're working on projects to regrow seagrass. Our bottom has just become easily stirred up, and it gets plowed by boaters regularly. If you go to other places, they have sanctuaries. You can't run the boat in this area. You can start to get seagrasses back. I think it's a critical step of trying to clean up our inland bays. So metrics, I talked about metrics a little bit. There's a whole lot of folks in the room talking about water metrics. I would urge you to look up. Those bays used to be full of ducks and geese in the winter. Why were they there? Because there were seagrasses there, because there was good water quality there. So as you're looking at goals and trying to visualize things that are good for the waterway, think about the birds, the ducks, the geese, all the other things. It's a bigger picture, and when you get to that bigger picture, you get other NIMBY groups that join in and help you. So thank you. Feel free to call me, mark@delawareoysters.com. Always happy to do anything I can to make the world a better place.
Thank you, Mark. And I will say, Mark invited me out to his home where he runs his seafood operation, and it's really awesome and very inspiring. So that's the type of people we need. So thank you for being here. So let me tell you a little bit about Dr. Janet Reamer. She's Marco's very own science program manager, and she's going to share an awesome new tool for the region to inform decision-making, especially as it relates to the coastal economy. Janet has a PhD in coastal oceanography with a focus on biogeochemistry of water and sediments. Her research in the last decade has focused on coastal acidification, the marine carbonate system, and CO2 air-sea exchange. Most recently, her research has been devoted to assessing long-term increases in surface CO2 and related increasing acidity in U.S. East Coast waters. Janet's projects with Marco span a wide range of topics, including coastal and ocean acidification, organic carbon quantification and storage, offshore spatial planning for development, and citizen science initiatives. Thanks for stepping up, Janet.
Yeah. So actually, I don't have my science hat on today. I'm going to be talking to you about a project that Marco has been working on for the last about a year and a half, with MyCoast, mycoast.org. I'm actually going to encourage you to take out your cell phones during this presentation, because Marco is very excited to announce that we are kind of doing a soft launch with our online and cell phone application with MyCoast. So I'm going to encourage you to download the app and show you a little bit about what we're collecting, what kind of information Marco and our 5 state partners are collecting today. So just for those of you who may not be familiar with MyCoast, essentially you take a photo, you upload it to the MyCoast site, and then MyCoast pulls in background data to give context to the photo that you are uploading. So I'm going to tell you how this works, and we're going to go through a report or two and give you an idea of how, basically, what kind of information we're collecting, how it's going to be used, and who is going to be seeing it. So like I said, you take a photo with your phone, so you could be out at the beach, you could see some marine debris or something that you need to report or want to document sea lions that are out sunbathing. And so you take that photo, and then MyCoast grabs the geocode of your location from the image. So if you notice when on your iPhone or on your Android phone, sometimes your photo will actually tell you exactly where you are. So if you took a photo right now, it would show you that you're in Baltimore, Maryland. So that background information is pulled in by MyCoast, and it takes that photo in space and time and puts it into a database. So within that database, they also are drawing in information such as the sea surface temperature, the tide state, the weather, salinity, and any other information that is provided through NOAA tides or currents. And then it'll show you on the map where it is. And so this is an example here of the Chesapeake Bay and some information that has been collected throughout Maryland and Virginia. And then Marco collects that data as well as some of the states that already have a MyCoast app. So when we started this project, New York, New Jersey, and Maryland have already partnered with MyCoast, and they have their own reports that they collect. And to round out the 5 states, Marco also included Delaware and Virginia. So now we have all 5 states in the Mid-Atlantic collecting information from MyCoast. I should also mention that MyCoast is a nonprofit. It's actually out of Oregon, and there are several other states around the country that participate. So if you go to mycoast.org, and there will be a list of states or projects that are collecting information. So MyCoast is essentially a tool that documents our coastlines. It can also be used in other areas as well, but the whole point of MyCoast is that it is documenting changes along our coasts, and they've been collecting information now for several years. So states and other entities use MyCoast to build the tools that they need to collect the data that they need and to engage with their citizens. So this is essentially a citizen science project because we're relying on users or reporters to provide us with information about what they're doing, what they're seeing, and also one of the main things that that MyCoast gets used for is documenting king tides events, which is very important here in the Mid-Atlantic considering sea level rise. They also document coastal storm damage, some restoration efforts, as well as other high water and nuisance flooding. We're also looking to collect information on recreational areas of interest. Where are people using recreation? Where are people recreating, and what kind of facilities are they maybe favoring versus, one beach versus another? And of course, large marine debris. So when we say large marine debris, we're talking about things that are like basketball size and bigger. So we need to put it into the context of our users so that they can understand what kind of information we want, because this is actually not an opportunity to collect information on things like water bottles or cigarette butts. One thing that's very important to note that MyCoast does not collect personal information, so if you're concerned about uploading anything from your cell phone to MyCoast, it strictly collects only your spatial location. So for our Mid-Atlantic collaboration with MyCoast, the app is now available for people to download and submit a report from anywhere in the region. We have collaborated with the states that already have MyCoast, so we collaborated with New York, New Jersey, and Maryland to ensure compatibility, and that is still a process that we're working through, and that will never change because this is a collaborative effort and not a sole state effort. Again, it's a regional citizen science tool, and it provides that mechanism for public voluntary input and information on the shared priorities. And Marco is specifically focusing on large marine debris, recreation, and wildlife. So the data will be provided Marco collects the data, and then we're also going to share it with our states as requested. Some of the information will go directly to the states, and they get to review it first. In other circumstances, if there is not a state representative available to kind of pull in the information and ingest it the way that state has maybe designated, Marco will be able to stand in and help in that effort. So like I said, the three types of information that we are collecting right now are large marine debris, and we're asking users to report debris larger than a basketball, and some states may actually use this information to trigger a cleanup or a response effort. So when we were collaborating with the states to figure out how they would want to use the information, specifically Delaware stepped up and said, hey, we have a cleanup effort that's ongoing, and we really would love to get this information as quickly as possible so that we can potentially respond to it. Then recreation, so we're asking people to submit reports about where and how they're recreating on the coast or in offshore waters. And that way, the states can kind of get a sense of why people are choosing to go to one location versus another, accessibility requirements that may be met or not being met, and how to improve those, and as well kind of understanding where different activities are occurring most so that they can plan. Maybe there's, a public boat dock that needs repairing and people stop going there. And so they want to encourage folks to go back there, but improvements need to be made. So we are collecting information on why they're choosing one location versus another. And then finally, wildlife. And so this is, we're asking that coastal recreators or residents can find and submit this information about, not only find information about wildlife best practices, but also provide us with locations where different species tend to congregate, so that if there's issues with interactions, that states could potentially expand their wildlife protections, and that may be in the form of creating protected areas, or wildlife management areas. So I'm going to take an opportunity right now, and Avalon, I'm going to have to call you back up because I am not a Mac user, and we're going to visit mycoast.org, and I'm going to walk you through probably submitting 1 or 2 reports. So we're going to go up here to, it's not working. All right. It's not working. So I'm just going to tell you. So when you go to submit a report, it's actually very simple. The first thing that you're going to do is you select the photo, which is, you can either do it from a desktop computer or you can do it from your phone. And then for wildlife, it's going to ask you a couple of questions. It's going to ask you, first, what kind of animal do you think this is? And so we're not expecting the public to be able to identify a species, but it certainly gives us a little bit of a head start. So I'm personally, I was going to upload a photo of a seagull. There are a lot of bird watchers out there, and so it'll help us. Collecting information on where birds are and what type of bird is certainly going to help us understand migration routes. So these are the kinds of things that we want to be able to collect over time. And then another photo that I was going to upload for recreation was a photo that was taken last year, or 2 years ago, on a fishing trip after the Marco Marine Debris Summit that several of us went on. So there's a really good reason to come to Marco events, because we also have great field trips. So it was a photo of myself and one of our state partners, Casey Personius from New York State DEC. And so we went out on this fishing trip, and I would upload a photo of us fishing, and I would say, all right, the activity that I am partaking in is fishing. And then it has another question of, why did you choose this site? Or for boating, why did you choose this boat launch or marina? And then there's several different options that you can pick, and it's all multiple choice so that users don't have to spend a lot of time specifically entering information. And then for the large marine debris, and for me this is actually the most interesting one, because we're not only collecting information on, okay, somebody sees marine debris, but we're collecting information on do they know an approximate water depth? Do they know if it's submerged or if it's floating? And all of that information will go directly into a report that the state's resource managers can look at and say, okay, well, there's a piece of a dock that's floating in the middle of the channel near Mark Casey's home because he's reporting it. And so we can send somebody out and safely remove that. We also have a number of disclaimers that say, please do not try to remove any marine debris yourself. And then there's also an email that gets sent to the user, and that has a lot of information in it. So if you are reporting marine debris in Virginia, there's several different phone numbers that you could call in case of an emergency. So we provide those phone numbers, and we provide, for wildlife, we're also providing some websites for best practices for interacting with wildlife. And over the series of the different reports, like I said, we also can collect things like sea surface temperature, salinity, and eventually we'll be able to take all of that information and turn it into data layers for our Mid-Atlantic Ocean Data Portal. We're still figuring out what those data layers will be, but this is a great opportunity for several different MARCO work groups to collaborate across our interdisciplinary focuses of study so that we can collaborate and keep collecting this data, and eventually we'll be able to see change over time. So this will help us not only build coastal resilience, but protect our important ocean economy. Thank you.
Janet, thank you for filling in and moving seamlessly through technology issues. There's always something.
So you can download the app through the app stores on your phones. It's fun.
So next, from just down the road, we have Adam Lindquist, Vice President of the Waterfront Partnership of Baltimore, to talk about how tourism and recreation drive economic and environmental initiatives. As Vice President of the Waterfront Partnership, Adam spearheads the organization's environmental work. Currently celebrating his 14th year with the organization, Adam has been instrumental in the creation of Mr. Trash Wheel, the Baltimore Oyster Partnership, the Baltimore Blue Way, and Harbor Splash, the first public swim in Baltimore Harbor in over 40 years. Adam grew up in central New York, surrounded by the Finger Lakes, waterfalls, and gorges that make up the region. His love of the outdoors and natural waterways made him a lifelong environmentalist, and his desire to make a difference led him to study watershed planning and pursue his master's degree at the University of Maryland, College Park. Adam, welcome. Thank you for being here.
Awesome, thank you, thank you. Sorry, thank you for putting up with the technology delay. Good morning, and thank you for inviting me here. It's really exciting to be here to speak with you all today. My name again is Adam Lindquist, and I'm the Vice President of the Waterfront Partnership of Baltimore. I'm going to tell you guys an interesting story today about how the business community in downtown Baltimore came together to basically take what was a real liability to the tourism industry in Baltimore City, which is polluted water, and transformed it, I think, into a tourism boon for Baltimore City. So Waterfront Partnership, the organization I work for, we are not at our core an environmental organization. We're what's known as a business improvement district. If you're not familiar with that, they're in cities all around the world. There's 5 or 6 of them here in Baltimore alone. It's where in a geographic area, the business community comes together and says, hey, we really need to supplement the services being provided to the city to make sure that our business district looks as amazing and as beautiful as we want it to look. So the Waterfront Partnership is such an entity, and our board is made up of the developers and the business owners, the property owners, all around the Baltimore waterfront. But what they did was they came together and decided that they did traditional business improvement district stuff. They cleaned up the litter on the sidewalks. They hired landscapers to do all the landscaping around the district. But they decided that that wasn't enough because they're a waterfront district and the water was actually looking really grim. So I'm going to talk a bit about this project here. How many people here in the room are familiar with what we call Mr. Trash Wheel? Oh, all right, great. Got a lot of Trash Wheel fans in the room. So this is Mr. Trash Wheel, and it's probably the most notable thing that the Waterfront Partnership has contributed to the cleanup and restoration of the Baltimore Harbor. But when I started my job, I did not know that I would one day become the overlord of multiple googly-eyed trash interceptors, or that my work would someday get featured in the Guinness Book of World Records, where Mr. Trash Wheel is featured for picking up the most floating trash and debris from a waterway, a category I think they made just for us, or that Mr. Trash Wheel would be one day featured on the cover of a Dr. Seuss book that came out last year about green machines and other eco-adventures. When Waterfront Partnership got together and decided they wanted to do something about the Baltimore Harbor, things were in pretty bad shape. Tons of trash was coming into the harbor, especially after rain events. There were sewer overflows and leaks coming from our city's 100-year-old sewer system, and stormwater runoff was carrying pollutants into the harbor, which resulted in frequent fish kill events. So this is what Waterfront Partnership was faced with when they launched the Healthy Harbor Initiative all the way back in 2010 with a goal of making the harbor safe for swimming and fishing by the year 2020. And so we got to work with a bunch of different projects. I can't go into all of them today, but I did want to emphasize this one because it's just become such such an icon for Baltimore City and the Baltimore Harbor, which is this device invented by a local guy named John Kellett. John worked in Baltimore down on the waterfront for the Living Classrooms Foundation, and he saw all the trash coming into the harbor, and he thought to himself, what if we could create a trash interceptor that used the current of a river to power a system of rakes and a conveyor belt that pulled trash out of the water before it could get out into the open water of the Baltimore Harbor and the Chesapeake Bay. And so John invented this amazing device that sits at the end of rivers and streams and uses a set of containment booms to funnel trash as it comes down the river to the front of the device, where solar and hydropower run a system of rakes and a conveyor belt that pick up the trash and put it onto a dumpster sitting in a separate barge in the back of the device. So when that dumpster is full, we can pull it away and put in a new dumpster and keep right on collecting trash. But what is this illustration missing, people? Right, where? We need some googly eyes. So that's where I came along and I said, you know, I don't want us to just be collecting trash from the Baltimore Harbor indefinitely. We really need this device to also help contribute to reducing the amount of trash and debris that ends up in the Baltimore Harbor in the first place, or gets into our waterways, or even onto the streets of Baltimore City in the first place. So I added these. I built the first set of 4-foot tall googly eyes in my basement. Those were like the prototype. We decided those were too small, so Mr. Trash Wheel has 5-foot tall googly eyes. And then there are 4 additional trash wheels now located around Baltimore, known as Professor Trash Wheel, Captain Trash Wheel, and Gwenda, the Good Wheel of the West. And here is just a quick video that I took in 2014, so this was right after Mr. Trash Wheel was first installed. It was a very exciting day for us. We were picking up, this is the first rainstorm. So one thing to know about the trash wheels is about 90% of the trash they collect comes down during a rain event. So this was an exciting day. We were collecting trash. Mr. Trash Wheel was eating his first tire. And over the course of a weekend, this video went to #1 on Reddit and received over 1 million views on YouTube. So we knew people were really excited about this. And we thought, how are we going to build on the interest and this one viral video? Here's another video of Mr. Trash Wheel collecting trash. This is a time-lapse video. One thing we like to say about Mr. Trash Wheel is he is very strong because he can lift whole trees up out of the harbor, but he is very, very slow. Which is actually really a benefit because it means that wildlife doesn't get harmed by our operations. But you can see this is the trash that generally comes down during a rain event. But we realized when we created Mr. Trash Wheel, we had this character who could then interact and talk, at least on social media, to the public. And so we started sharing all of the weird things that we pulled out of the harbor. And we found there was a really big audience for this. And Mr. Trash Wheel always has this fun commentary. You know, I'm never sleeping again when he picks up this creepy baby doll, or I'm opening the world's soggiest Airbnb when we got this mattress. This one, a Baltimore Cinderella left her shoe at the ball last night. Won't you be my trash queen? We've even picked up this acoustic guitar, which I actually have now. It took about 2 years to dry out, and now it's a little bit playable. But it's a Mr. Trash Wheel guitar pulled out of the Baltimore Harbor. And then perhaps one of the most notable things that we ever pulled out of the harbor was this python snake. You know, native to West Africa, would have been someone's like pet that escaped and got washed down the river and ended up on Mr. Trash Wheel. You see it there wrapped around Mr. Trash Wheel's power inverter, which is the warmest spot on Mr. Trash Wheel. And we actually had the curator for the National Aquarium, Jack Cover, came out and removed the snake. I wasn't going to remove it. And it was adopted to a good home. But it's often, if there's one thing people in Baltimore City remember about Mr. Trash Wheel, it's this time he picked up a python snake. And as we share all of this weird stuff with our, what turns out to be our fan base on social media, our fans start giving things back to us. So you see now Mr. Trash Wheel birthday cakes in Baltimore, gingerbread houses, Mr. Trash Wheel Halloween costumes. I love this. This kid had a working conveyor belt. So you put trash on the conveyor belt and it would take it back into his trick-or-treating bag inside his costume. More people just dressing up and celebrating the trash wheels. And I mean, my favorite is seeing Mr. Trash Wheel tattoos now. I mean, you really know you're impacting your audience if people are tattooing your project onto their flesh for the rest of their lives. None of these are me. let's see. I'm not sure if we have sound. Does anyone know? Let's find out. All right, let's see. Well, let's see. So this next little video here, this was an announcement from 2 weeks ago when Mr. Trash Wheel was recruited. Let's see if this works.
Leading up to the draft, I like to watch as much tape as I can. We have our guy this year. We've got one shot to get it right. We don't want to waste any opportunity.
I would take #1 overall. You talk about speed. You talk about seeing the field. First off the edge.
We want people to eat, breathe, and sleep football.
This is the entity I would take #1 overall.
You want guys who aren't afraid to do the dirty work. You want to play a clean game. You can always tell a guy who can read the field. You have to have good eyes that way. Big eyes, wide open eyes.
For a whole world loves coming to the harbor. When you come to the harbor, it's clean. It looks great because of this entity.
We'd rather have people that don't sleep at all, just thinking about the job all the time, keeping it clean, keeping the motor running.
Mr. Trash Wheel, #1 on my board.
The only downside to this guy, he's a little bit of a trash talker.
So that was announced on Earth Day this year. Thank you. That was John Harbaugh, of course, the coach for the Baltimore Ravens. They announced that Mr. Trash Wheel was their first draft pick of the 2025 season. So, but we're not all just googly eyes and silly tweets and silly videos with the Baltimore Ravens. We do actually do our work. We pick up a lot of trash, over 3,000 tons of trash and debris, over 14 million cigarette butts, over 2 million plastic bottles. And we provide all of this data for free on MrTrashWheel.com. For every dumpster we've ever pulled out of the harbor, we provide estimates for what was in every single dumpster, and this is used by researchers around the world to inform plastic policies around cleaning up the oceans and removing plastics from our waterways. Here in Maryland, we've used our data and our photos to help Maryland become the first state in the country to ban styrofoam takeout containers. We also help Baltimore City and Baltimore County ban plastic bags with our photos and our data. So it's great to have less trash in the Baltimore Harbor. It's great to both have trash interceptors picking up the trash and also to know that thanks to legislation, there's now just less litter coming down to the Baltimore Harbor. So we're able to move on to other parts of our mission. Like I said, we wanted a swimmable, fishable harbor. So a couple years ago, we launched the Baltimore Blueway, which is a master plan for water trails around the Baltimore Harbor, so that people can now start to kayak in the Baltimore Harbor. We have an annual paddling rally called the Baltimore Flotilla. And this is kind of our plan here for expanding kayak access and paddling access throughout the Baltimore Harbor by building 5 new kayak launches in Baltimore Harbor over the next 5 years. And they will be connected by a system of water trails, which are just basically recommended routes for how people can paddle around the Baltimore Harbor. And I love kayaking. I do a lot of kayaking out in the Chesapeake Bay. I see a lot of nature. I see a lot of wetland grasses and marshes, and I love that stuff. It's beautiful. But I think nowhere else have I seen on the East Coast where you can paddle and see within a 1 mile radius such a diverse range of attractions as you can see in the Baltimore Harbor. Whether you want to see environmental restoration projects like the floating wetlands at the National Aquarium or Mr. Trash Wheel, or you want to see historic ships like the Pride of Baltimore, the Constellation, the Torch Submarine, or just see the city skyline from the water. But if you paddle south down to the Middle Branch, you can still paddle through wetlands. You can see bald eagles. You can see terns and egrets. So I think there's just a tremendous variety of things to see and do when paddling in the Baltimore Harbor. This was our first kayak launch we installed last year in Fells Point. And this is a kayak launch we will be installing later this summer in the Inner Harbor. So this is great, a completely ADA accessible kayak launch that will be available to the public to paddle around the Baltimore Harbor. It'll be part of what we're calling the Inner Harbor Heritage Water Trail, which is this route here that takes you all around the great sites of the Inner Harbor. And last but not least, last year we also hosted the first public swimming event in the Baltimore Harbor in over 40 years. And we will be doing it again this June. thanks to Mr. Trash Wheel and all of the work that went into cleaning up the Baltimore Harbor and this like huge fan base of support for the restoration of the Baltimore Harbor. Harbor Splash sold out 150 tickets in 10 minutes. So there was a huge appetite for swimming in the Baltimore Harbor. We also were very conscious about water quality, so we ran a water quality monitoring program, testing water quality every single day leading up to the event. This is something we do every year now to make sure that the water was safe for recreation. And then on June 23rd of last year, we had, there must have been over 1,000 people came out to watch. This is the first 25 people who jumped into the Baltimore Harbor. Baltimore Mayor Brandon Scott is in there with us. You can see how many people came out to see. They're like, oh my God, people are jumping into the Baltimore Harbor. It was a beautiful day. I jumped in, I think, 7 times that day myself. I went in with every single group because it had been so long in the making. That's me right there. I was the last person. All right, and so that's the Healthy Harbor Initiative, a quick overview of some of our work and how we're working to make the Baltimore Harbor more swimmable, more paddleable, and just more accessible to people who come to Baltimore City and for the residents of Baltimore City as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Adam. I didn't know we were in the midst of such a global celebrity. All those social media likes and views, that's amazing. So we do have a little bit of time for some questions. So I'm gonna open it up. If anyone would like to ask a question or make a comment, please feel free.
I'm a bit gobsmacked by the success of this. I knew it was cool, but I didn't know how cool it was. I'm curious. Someone must have done some head scratching and some napkin figuring about, like, do you have a sense of what percentage of the trash that comes downstream into the harbor gets intercepted?
That's a great question. I mean, I think we put the trash wheels, we have 4 trash wheels. They're at the largest outfalls around Baltimore City. That's how we identified where we were going to place them. But I mean, there's over 100 different outfalls in Baltimore Harbor. So while I think the trash wheels are capturing a lot of the trash that comes down, from these major sources, like there's definitely still litter out there. And so I don't know exact percentages, but I think that is why it's so important that Mr. Trash Wheel be part of a movement to change behaviors and change legislation, and not just, because like intercepting trash is not the answer.
We have a question over here. Yeah, good segue, I guess, for our oyster restoration as well. I think, is there any kind of insight or information you could give on education and really thinking about these questions from those sources, right? Like, what can we all do around the table, folks who are close to data and information and to systems for cleanup, whether it's a trash mouth or a oyster reef? Just kind of thinking about the sources, right? Like, how can we help connect to those things? Do you have any thoughts about sort of outreach and education programs? Whoever wants to take that one.
Well, I think reaching out to the community is the first one, right? So in the schools, in the libraries, I think these kids' books are extremely powerful. It is amazing to me that the people we've had to our educational session, they'll come in with their families. We'll go through all the benefits. We'll take them out on the dock. We have a couple of demos of a reef where we pull up a 1 square foot reef, and then we pull out all the crabs and the shrimp and the fish, and the kids get to hold them in their hands, and they're, microscopic. And it's amazing the number of mothers that have said to me, like, I've read these books to my kids, but today they got to see it. And it's him getting in the water and swimming, and getting in the water and doing it, or getting in wherever it is and seeing it, creates that value. If you create that value, and in my slide, the voters, they go tell the legislators to do it, the legislators do it, and now we get to it. So I think it's that bottom up. Teach the kids, and the kids will teach the future legislators, and we'll get to where we want to go.
We also have an oyster gardening program in the harbor, and I'd always say that we designed that program to be the most volunteer-intensive way of growing oysters, right? Not the quickest or easiest way. That wasn't important to us. We wanted to engage the most number of people. Because people think that the harbor is so toxic that it'll melt the flesh off of your hand if you put your hand in the water, right? They think nothing's in there. So you really need to reintroduce people of Baltimore to the idea that this is a living, breathing ecosystem that is already alive and we can improve it.
We have a question over here.
Yeah, hi. Mike McMahon. One little fact, I guess I've seen the trash wheel, and since people are in Baltimore, would you suggest directions to walk down to see it?
Yeah, of course. Please come visit Mr. Trashwell. Take a selfie, and he'll probably share it on Instagram. Mr. Trashwell is located in the neighborhood of Harbor East, and so if you were going to get there from here, you would head down to the inner harbor and the Pier 6 Concert Pavilion. I guess if I were going to put something into Google Maps, that's probably what I would put in there to get you, or the Baltimore Marriott Waterfront Hotel.
And I'd probably just add that when you heard some really interesting stories today, I mean, the trash wheel, such an awesome story, right? And then when you were talking about, when you made the phrase aquaculture, it's good for the environment, and then it makes farmers money. You know, those are great stories, and I think a big takeaway for all of us is you all are very good in the audience at the data, collecting the data. But then what do you do with this giant pile of data that's might be it's inaccessible, it's hard for people to relate to, right? And so it's taking that data and then funneling it into meaningful, compelling stories that then lead to more action because people then can understand, kind of the big picture.
I want to just kind of tie everything together a little bit because we have an opportunity to really pull in citizen science and value systems, cleaning up harborfront and kind of making it more a part of the local economy. And so if we, as one of Marco's kind of specialties is the collaborating across various different stakeholders, federal, state, local, and citizens. And if we really want to kind of include everything together, we can do that. We just, we need all of these different stories so that we can kind of synthesize it and come up with products and ways to reach the community. And I think through My Coast and through partnerships with the waterfront developers, waterfront users, that we really have that opportunity now to do that. And I think it's all really starting to come together.
Okay, time for one more question, so we'll go over here.
Janet, my question is for you about My Coast. I'm so excited that you're using My Coast, and to see the new tools on there is really awesome. I managed it in Maryland for a long time, and so very excited to see that. My question, though, is knowing how spread out people are in the Mid-Atlantic region, how are you planning on doing some of that more targeted engagement, outreach, to share My Coast, to share that there's an app? In Maryland, they were starting to do QR codes on posts at restoration sites. So that's kind of the first part of my question is how are you doing that outreach and engagement? And then how will you be sharing the data or using the data to inform decisions?
So the first part is that actually I was taking some notes during Adam's talk, and I think it would be really great to partner and try to get some signage put up at some of the kayak launches. Would be really cool. New Jersey already does a Places We Love, and so we're hoping to build on that as well. And we're going to be doing some social media campaigns and reaching out to each state individually to help them as well. So I have a lot of thoughts that are running around in my head, and this panel is actually a really great way to, that kind of triggered some more thoughts. So, and obviously Marco has, we have our social media platforms and we have partner organizations, so we'll be doing some very targeted and coming up with, graphics and some talking points and stuff like that. And then using it for decision making, well, we hope, like I said, we need to have, basically, I would say, like, start with a year's worth of reports and information, and then we will continue. This is part of, actually, I should have stated this, but this is part of the recreation, which we used to call it the non-consumptive recreation, which we're now calling the recreation work group. This is part of their work plan. And so we'll be working with all of the Marco work groups to incorporate MyCoast into their work plans as well, I hope.
I'll just add too, first off, Kate, it seems like we need you on the work group.
Please.
And secondly, our role at Marco is really to provide the information and data to the states and to other folks on the Mid-Atlantic Ocean Planning Committee and to all of you. And you all are the experts, and so you can do what you will with it. We're not going to be super prescriptive about that. So our role here is to understand what information you need. This will be a theme that you'll see throughout the day, is that there's lots and lots of data out there, but the important thing is to translate that data into information that is usable. And we at Marco don't necessarily prescribe that, but we listen to what a lot of different people are saying about information needs and kind of help tailor our work and work plans to meet that. So that's really where the recreation work group comes into play. And Mark, it looks like you have a response too.
In Delaware, and I think it's probably a misunderstanding or miscommunication, the Department of Transportation's group has a large database already where they're looking at flooded roads. So literally, when it rains in an area, they know that there's going to be water level rise, and they've started a program that's similar. So tying that funded group to this effort, I think, is a huge step, and really get those low spots.
And I will also say that we, like I said, we partner with many different organizations, and we'll certainly be reaching out to new partners as well.
All right, I think that's all we have time for, unfortunately, but Adam, Janet, Mark, Will, thank you so much for sharing your insight and expertise with us. This was really, really wonderful, and I hope that you all enjoyed it as well.